Hey June.
Hey Akari.
I mumbled the second half as I got home, and was surprised to see we had visitors. Akari and June were sitting around the couch but neither were watching TV. June threw up a waving hand for a moment,
but Akari didn't say anything, which was
odd.
Okay, what's going on? I demanded towards the two very distracted people.
Oddly distracted.
It's nothing, Motoko. Why don't you go to your room for a bit?
June said, while he very obviously cut off Akari from speaking. I frowned but June looked firm and I nodded.
All right. I'll leave you to your plotting. Don't get in over your head. If you need help just let me know. I demanded. Only when June nodded did I head into my room and flop on my bed. I kinda wanted to do more Rockaboy stuff, but if June and Akari were that serious I didn't want to be annoying. That meant I only had one more inside skill that I could work on. I stood up and headed for the desk in my room, covered in boxes of my scrap and tools. It had been laying there since I moved in. Time to get to work. While June would yell at me if I did any work on explosives, that wasn't all I had. I pulled out my Lexington and grabbed some tools, and after digging around I found some gun oil. Let's do some maintenance on my poor pistol that was worked so hard today, and then I would see about doing some work on it in general. Maybe a silencer? Maybe I should upgrade from a Lexington to a new, or something? Put a silencer on that? I ended up shaking my head. My Lexington would do pretty well with a silencer, but I liked the fact it was full auto. I ended up pulling the shard that had Mitch's information on how to make his silencer goop for the Overwatch and refreshed myself with it. That could be a fun project. I muttered as I finished putting the Lexington back together after giving it a full cleaning. It had needed that pretty badly. There was a lot of buildup in the barrel, and some of the parts were wearing down, but mostly the barrel. That ammo I bought for practice today was shit. Oh well. It was cheap, and it was good reflex practice. I hummed to myself as I looked over everything I would need for a silencer. I had some of the stuff, but Mitch's nanite goop that would auto-repair the silencer as it was used was too useful not to want to mess with. Even if this was going to be a silencer I could fit on and off at will, unlike the attached barrel of the Overwatch. I needed, well, a few additional tools. Making nanomachines wasn't an easy job. As I started writing down what I needed I realized I really couldn't do a silencer like Mitch's. At all. I tried to figure out how to make the nanite goop, and despite my best efforts I just didn't know how. Sure, I had the instructions, but what Mitch had written down considered someone already knowing how to work some things that I didn't. It had been a while since I had run into something that I just outright didn't know. So I need to level technical ability first. I'll make a more standard silencer to get by until later, I decided with a mutter to myself, as I pulled out pieces and then had to sigh. I didn't have the parts for the electronic baffler. Sure, I could make a box standard silencer, but it wouldn't be silent. The fact Cyberpunk tech had nearly perfect silencers was something the modern world wasn't even close to copying. Okay, I needed to go to an electronics store. And probably a tinker place too, because I could use some extra scrap metals if I wanted to make more than just one silencer. I needed more stuff to build if I was going to level tech after all. Okay, I was going to mod some of the rest of my weapons. I mean, I couldn't mod my Boya with anything. At least not with my current knowledge. But the copperhead I've been using could fit a silencer. Hey, that could be pretty fun. Going into a gig all tactical and stuff. I had sort of done it with Jackie that one time we hit scavs together. Ah, that was fun. Killing scavs with the tunes. I quickly brought up a second CAD design for a silencer to fit a copperhead. The copperhead was easy, but the Lexington? I would have to modify the barrel, or make an entirely new barrel for it. That just meant more work though. More work meant more XP. After a few designs I had my list of parts I needed. I had even gotten a Tech XP alert just for designing the parts. I left my bedroom noticing that Akari and June were still chatting, a tablet in front of both of them that they were looking over. I shrugged. They would let me know if I could help, or not. I'm hitting the store. Be back in a bit, I called out as I left. As I walked through the halls I heard Rockaboy Neighbor playing again. I hummed along to the music, actually recognizing the song that she was playing now as one from her set, and headed into the elevator. Tech stores were actually pretty common in Night City.
So I didn't end up having to go very far from the apartment to find a store that should have what I wanted. After a few minutes of browsing and filling up my arms with everything I would need, I was back in the apartment. Ignoring June and Akari's continued meeting in the living room, as I went to work. First I set up the 3D printer with steel feed to begin creating the silencer's physical frame. Once that was started, I rolled over to an empty section of the bench and pulled out the electronics I needed. The electronic baffler was an interesting bit of tech. Using vibrations, it basically countered the noise of the bullet leaving the barrel entirely, turning what should be a suppressor into a true silencer. It wouldn't silence the bullets themselves once they left the barrel, of course. A piece of metal breaking the sound barrier was still a piece of metal breaking the sound barrier, but there were ways to get around that. Close shots would keep it from making too much noise, and, well, messing with this noise baffle was giving me ideas for a quick hack. Or maybe just an upgrade? Noise canceller? No, I would probably end up having to do the reverse. Noise bang? I considered the name. Sure, it wouldn't be stealthy that way, but if I blind and deafen someone, that would pretty heavily disable them. I added it to the list of future ideas, and continued putting together the electronics of the small vibration dampener, powered with a small battery, that was all integrated into the silencer. I rolled my chair back over to the 3D printer, and pulled out the steel silencer that was now finished. I replaced it with the barrel of my Lexington, which was just having the tip of the barrel adjusted to let the silencer be screwed onto it. With that being prepared, I moved the silencer onto the workbench and started sanding down a bit of the exterior where the steel was sharp. I painted it, leaving it a matte black. Then I popped open the small section of the silencer, and started putting in the electronics and battery. Once that was done, I sealed that up, and placed the completed silencer on the desk. Cool. Yeah, it was cool. Silencers were cool. I rolled back over to the 3D printer. The barrel was almost done, and I just tinkered with my Lexington, getting it ready for the barrel as I let it finish. Then as the noise of the printer ended, I grabbed the still warm barrel, and slid it into place. Then grabbed the silencer and screwed it on. That's fucking cool, I muttered. I made sure the Lexington was empty before drawing it up, and then putting it down, getting a feel for the pistol's new weight. Then I tried to put it into the holster and realized a problem. Silencer doesn't fit. I stepped out of the room, deciding to take a break. I had an idea on what to do about the silencer, but that would happen later. I walked out to get a drink out of the fridge and noticed June and Akari were both gone. I hoped they were okay, but it created some good news. It meant it was Rockaboy time. I ran back into my room and grabbed my guitar and music box and dragged them out to the couch. Plugging my personal link into the music box, I was ready to do more music. I actually had a pretty good idea for a song that I wanted to add to my collection. This time it would be heavy electronica. I would barely need my guitar this time. A challenge. Like how The Only Thing They Fear made me push beyond just normal instruments. But it would be worth it. I went back to my room and grabbed the speakers as well, hooking them up so I could physically hear the sound instead of just relying on my agent's cyber audio suite. Slowly the noise started filling the apartment. Thankfully this apartment was so big, the acoustics were much better than the old one. I wouldn't disturb every person in the building like our last apartment, so I didn't feel bad about doing some songwriting. I mean, if Rockaboy Neighbor did it, then I could too. Yet even with the challenge of going far more electronic than my usual songs, I barely struggled in putting the song together. I already knew it after all. I had listened to it at least once, so I knew every chord, every beat. Rise. They will remember you. Rise. I recorded having finished the instrumental part. Now I was just recording the vocals, altering my voice for each different singer so it actually sounded like a team of people in the song. Ah man. Rise was such a nerdy song. I was so happy no one would ever know I was remaking a fucking video game championship song. It was so catchy though. Push through hell and rise. Rise. I belted out. Totally into it, as I listened to the song both aloud and through my agent, checking for errors that I would need to adjust. I finished another vocal track and turned only to instantly yelp and lose my balance from the couch. June. You jerk.
If you were here you should have said something, I demanded, throwing an empty can of soda at him.
He just reached out and grabbed it out of the air before it could hit him. Harry, standing beside him, was looking about half as excited as she normally was.
That was Nova Toko. I like your other song more though,
she offered, and I turned to glare at June again, firmly pointing. You wouldn't know about any of the songs if not for this gonk. If you were trying to keep it a real secret, putting it in a BD probably wasn't a good idea, he said as he pushed me aside with a gentle bump of his hip that still sent me stumbling.
Harry and June both took a seat on the couch, a tablet pulled out that they both ducked their head into.
Okay, seriously, what is with you two?
Nothing, June offered, but I wasn't going to take that. Both Harry and June were worried about something. Bullshit. What's going on?
TC business, Emoto.
Nothing you want to get involved with, June said, cutting off the conversation, and I hesitated. Because he was right. I didn't want to get involved in TC business.
Fine, but whatever it is, even if I don't want to get involved,
if you need help tell me.
I threw my hands up then and took a few steps towards my room,
but I didn't want to do anything in there right now. I walked out of the apartment instead. Time to work out a bit.
If only half the worthless gonks that come to me for a bit of muscle have half your dedication,
John offered as I was once more pushing myself. You probably say that
to all the kids that show
some effort. I spoke in between squats and the old man barked to laugh at that. Yes, but that only makes what I said even more true. Haven't seen your brother come back. June
is doing some work
right now. I'll remind him
soon. Excellent. Fujimura wanted me to keep an eye on his little chrome soldiers. Rude. Hey. Been around as long as I have, seen how many of those chromed out morons lose themselves and you stop feeling much sympathy.
Well, June is pretty solid now.
Yeah, I saw that. Kid's got a good head on his shoulders.
That won't save him if he keeps chroming out.
And he will if he doesn't get some damn exercise.
That's one of the biggest excuses. Not strong enough.
Hey. I couldn't help but chuckle because I had heard that before.
David. Both of those morons said the same thing.
Still, don't blow out your knees. This is the second day in a row I've seen you belting out those squats. I sighed internally and nodded, finishing my last rep before racking the weights. This is why I didn't want someone trying to train me. They might notice I didn't respond to shit the same way a normal person would. My legs went tired the day after exercise, because I healed completely with a nap. Thanks for the talk, I offered, and reached over to grab my boya and shoulder holster that I had removed while training.
Hey, hold up, kid.
I didn't come to chat with you to talk about your brother or poor training methods.
I have a kid your age that I'm training, but she's getting a bit out of hand.
She doesn't have anyone her age bracket to challenge her, John explained, and I instantly felt my face flatten. You were kidding, right? You want me to what? Become her rival or something?
Hey.
A rival would be good, but I don't expect that. You probably won't win. I just need a challenge. Something to push her. To make her realize she can't just coast by on her talent. John offered, and it was with absolute surety that the man pulled out the "I know you won't win" card, just to get me to agree. But fuck it. I was bored, and I could use some street fighting XP. Not that I was going to make it that easy. What's in it for me? I asked, and the man smiled. Well, for one, access to a better gym than this place. I replied instantly, as being watched while I worked out was kinda the problem. Hey, fine. Do this and I'll make it worth your while with some eddies. Say 300? 300 eddies was pocket change. But I wasn't going to try and squeeze blood from a rock. Fine. Alright. Come on, kid. He waved me to follow, but I didn't. Motoko, I informed him simply with a frown. Thankfully he picked what I was putting down a moment after. Fair enough, come on Motoko, let's go meet Hayato. This time I followed. Out of the gym area, then down the red neon steps that led up to the buildings. I thought for a moment we would get in a car, but instead John just took a left and turned into a small section that had a bunch of elevators. Then we skipped those too. There was a path on the right that hugged the building, and we went a ways down before he turned in and entered into a heavily unset door. If I wasn't fully armed and dealing with TC thugs, I might have started to get a little concerned at this point, but the door opened into, well, a little gym. A hole-in-the-wall gym. I didn't know this place was here. Then again, I didn't know a lot of shops in the area. Gamora was the large name painted across the wall. And as we walked in, I noticed there was an area in the middle that had mats, and standing on the mats was a girl around my age. At least I think she was my age. She was about my height, maybe a little taller, I realized as she was wearing pads for her feet rather than shoes, and I was still in my boots. But it was the tattoos that covered arms and back that made me realize this wasn't just an average girl. No teenager with more tiger claw tattoos than June could be normal. The pure Asian features were interesting as well. Straight black hair tied up into a bun and ponytail was an odd sight, because it was natural. Just normal natural hair was kinda weird in Night City. Especially one with the money this girl obviously had. The quick scan I did told me she also had a lot of chrome, including a Kerenzikov. She was obviously impatient. Her body language dripped with how annoyed she was. So when John rounded the corner and she saw him, she instantly started speaking, almost too fast. Her words came out in a rush that sounded almost sped up. And she was cussing in Japanese. So I understood exactly zero of it, other than she was upset. I think I heard a baka in there as well? Hayato. John responded, cutting her off, and she went silent while glaring. This is Motoko. She's going to be the one you fight today. You bring me to this trash heap, leave me for hours and then expect me to fight some. The girl cut herself off as she took me in fully. Sure, I had been exercising, but I was still fully armed. I went nowhere without my guns now after all. I looked her over as well, and made my decision. I pulled off my jacket and threw it over a chair near the entrance, letting everyone see how armed I was. A few moments later I hung my shoulder holster over the chair, and placed my Lexington and holster on the seat as well. My knife was dropped on it as well, and then I took a moment to drop my pouches on the chair as well. Ammo, max stocks, ammo. All placed on the chair, leaving it rather full of my equipment. I sat on the chair next to it, and started taking off my boots as well. Who is this? Motoko Kusanagi. You may have heard of her brother. The only of the kamikaze. Are those cyber psychos? Juni is doing really well actually. I offered as I was finally free of my boots and stepped onto the mats. I've never heard of her. I don't care if her brother is famous. That has nothing to do with her. The girl argued snootily and I couldn't help but chuckle. So true. I wasn't an Oni like June, always relying on brute force and stuff. The fact he called me a gorilla was long erased from my brain. And I did not bring her here for her brother's accomplishments. John replied, and I got to watch a second of the girl basically going through emotions that would normally take a few seconds before she scoffed. I am Hayato Nakagawa, she said, speaking as if I should recognize the name. I didn't, of course, nor would I somehow feel dumb for not recognizing some random teenager. So I was just going to deal with this like I deal with everything. Nice to meet you, Hayato-chan. Let's beat each other's faces in, until we both feel better. I chirped as I started hopping around a bit to limber up as I brought my hands up in a boxing stance. My words seemed to do the opposite of creating camaraderie as the girl's face shifted into the look of someone stepping in dog shit. If I must. She growled, and I could tell she was about to charge before John raised a hand and stopped us both. Gloves first, Motoko. Over there. He pointed and I noticed a rack with spare gloves and foot pads. I made a noise of pleasure as I had never gotten to fight someone with pads before. I quickly hopped over and took out a pair for hands and feet. This was going to be fun. The wait for me to finish putting on the pads seemed to do Hayato absolutely no favors. She was tapping her feet on the mats at a fast speed. Her hands kept twitching up like she was going to start pointing and yelling or something, but she would bring them down as soon as the urge hit, so it meant her hands were jerking around a bit every few seconds. Yikes. Once I had gloves and the cool kicky foot pads, I stepped back onto the mats. Try to keep it to pure martial arts. John spoke out before backing off the mat, and that was all the signal Hayato needed. She rushed me, moving very fast across the mat, but it wasn't Sandy-like. No, Instead, as she drew close and started punching, I realized the difference between fighting someone with a Sandy and with a Karen. The Sandy would move so fast you couldn't react and you would be out. The Karen though? They were just reacting to you as soon as you did something. Start throwing a punch? They already saw the motion and were prepared. I went to block her first punch and a moment later was stumbling back as she shifted from a straight punch to an uppercut under my guard. But Hayato wasn't done. She charged right back in. Another blow. This time I did barely manage to get a guard up in time, but she wasn't stopping. Punch, 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 punch. A rapid series of attacks that she kept trying to slip in through any openings. I threw a punch to make room and nearly got a blow across the jaw for it. It was like fighting someone who was reading your mind. In other words, it was fun as fuck. I had street brawler levels to grind here. I lured her in, letting her focus on trying to punch my face in, when I bounced. Suddenly she wasn't punching my face but below my legs. She reacted instantly, trying to duck back, but just because her mind was sped up, didn't mean her body was the same. I slammed a kick forward and she blocked it, but it still sent her stumbling back. Then I landed and I had a singular moment where the initiative was mine. I pounced. My legs launched me forward in a punch that she desperately tried to juke to the right to avoid, but I shifted from a punch into a grab, even as her arm was attempting to pull away from my move, even successfully managing to avoid my grasping hand. Fucking Karen. It didn't matter because as I missed her, I was behind her, and the moment my feet touched the mat I launched myself back. She couldn't see me. I was behind her. She certainly felt it though when I pounced into a jump kick that sent her flailing onto her face. I stepped back even as John moved to try and break it up and I got a nod for not pushing now that Hayato was down. She stood up in a flash, her face in a rage. We didn't speak. Instead John stepped back and it was on. She rushed me again, but I had learned my lesson. If I stay on the defense, she beats me, because she could simply react faster than I could do anything. I charged in with a light leap, and then went straight into grabbing at her. Grapples was my answer to her reaction time. If I could get my hands on her, I would win. I was confident in my grappling with my skills so high, and with grappling perk boosting that. Unfortunately, I think I made her angry. She was avoiding my grasping hands, and she timed me perfectly. 1 second I was bending down a bit to grab a retreating wrist when a fist smashed into my face, and I was off my feet. I rolled and stood up shakily, completely surprised at what just happened. She didn't hit like a teenage girl. She hit me so hard I felt like June just took a swipe at me. John had broken the fight again but was there this time seemingly waiting to see if I could keep fighting. I twisted my neck and winced a bit at the crackle. Ow! Wiping my face I noticed I was bleeding even with the glove softening the blow. Okay, what biomods do you have and where can I get me some? I asked joking, as I took a second for the room to stop spinning. Many, and that is unlikely. You do not strike me as someone with the wealth required. She responded back cattily and I chuckled at that. Fair enough. Really wish I could grab a max stock right now but that would be rather telling. Instead I simply bounced around a second regaining my motion and nodded to John. He backed up and my actions seemed to have surprised the little power princess here. I had misjudged her because she had so little direct chrome. But the Karen I realized wasn't her only upgrade. Biomods to enhance muscles and bones, and probably twitch reflexes. And it turned a normal-looking girl, besides the Karen sticking out the back of her neck, fixed into her neural link and what were probably ECM tattoos into a monster martial artist. But I was better. Well, through pure skill I was better. She was good though. Probably close to where I was through pure skill, she just had better stats. Well, the whole thing fell apart a bit there. What I was trying to say was that she was stronger and faster, but she relied on it. I moved in again. Fists swinging to alter her pace a bit, make her react to me, even if she was really good at that. I took a few blows as she weaved around avoiding my grabbing hands and she in turn attempted to slip blows around my arms, but I was pressuring her, and getting her rhythm. I feigned a grab and she struck. My hand spun around and locking onto her forearm created a half millisecond of shock. I very rarely spun my hands around 180 cause it was kinda uncomfy.
Yeah, let's go with that. But I was a grappler, and being able to grab with effectively the back of your hand was too useful to ignore. Then she folded around a knee to the stomach and I was instantly on top of her. All of her power and reflexes were useless when she was face first into the mat in an armbar she had no chance of breaking out of, even with her joints being more flexible than a normal person's. My chrome hands didn't get tired, and she simply couldn't leverage enough force to push my entire weight off of her. So for the first time in our little matches, she reached out and tapped out. She was coughing a little as I let go and she rolled onto her back to breath, but she recovered really fast. Faster than she should have from getting the wind knocked out of her, and she rose up. "You beat me?" she hissed, the question pulling from her with an almost stutter as she talked faster than she could seem to keep up with. I stood back up and prepped for her to strike at me, but she didn't. Instead she started talking in a buzz glaring at John, and it took a second for me to parse out what she said. "Did you hire some pretend teenager to humiliate me? Why do you always do this? You always try to trick me." "I'm 14. I offered after a moment, realizing that John was taking a moment to answer. "And John just watched me exercise at the gym outside my apartment. Asked me if I was willing to fight someone." "Shut up. I didn't ask you." She once more blabbermouthed at me, and I just rolled my eyes. Whatever. This was fun, I guess. I turned and walked back to my stuff. I pulled the pads off my hands as I flopped into the chair, barely paying attention to the spoiled rich girl throwing an absolute temper tantrum. My face still hurt, and I wanted to just get out of here. I did get some good street brawling XP though, so it wasn't all bad. By the time I finished putting all of my gear back on, Hayato was finished her surprisingly quiet argument with John. "Wait," she called out as I turned to leave the gym. It was rude of me not to acknowledge the bout. I turned, and to my surprise she did a cool martial arts pose, fist against flat palm, and bowed. "Thank you for the match." I quickly took the same pose because that was polite, and not because I thought it was cool. "Thank you for the match," I repeated, and then Hayato stood and sniffed. "Perhaps I will have John call on you in the future for another." "You were an acceptable challenge." Our eyes met for a moment, and I was surprised that the rage I had seen earlier was gone. Was that Chrome? Some weird biomod? Or did she just have good control over herself and knew how to push the anger aside? I pushed the question away. It didn't matter, but I could respect the apology for what it was. "Sure, here." I threw her my number, which seemed to surprise her. "Feel free to reach out if you want to set up another spar. I don't get enough practice with my fists, and that Karen of yours is something really useful to get some experience against." "Wise. Very well, Motoko. I look forward to our next bout." I nodded at that. Hayato, the rich girl. That had a fucking nasty right hook. "Yeah, I think we could be chums." I headed home. As I was walking down the hallway to the apartment, Rockaboy neighbor was leaving. We each passed each other without a word, but my narrowed eyes must have signaled something because the woman watched me pass. Then I pushed into the apartment only to see June and Akari still here. Both looked exhausted and sprawled out on the couches. I think Akari was actually sleeping face first into the cushions as June continued to work on whatever was going on with the two. "I'm home. Got to spar with a girl with a Karen. I ended up winning, sorta," I informed June, but I only got a thumbs up in return as June continued working on the tablet. "Okay, fine then," I grumbled as I went into my room, and just flopped on my bed. My face hurt, and my muscles ached a bit. Time for a nap. I woke up and instantly slipped out of the bed, feeling better with a lack of any pain on my face. I walked into the living room to see I was once more free from older brothers, but I wasn't going to stick around to enjoy it. I grabbed my equipment, and the big box of ammo I had bought for my Lexington. I hadn't figured out how to carry the silencer yet, so I just slipped it into the ammo box and I headed out to the gun range I had found before. Without Hiromi here, I could really do some work. I had thought ahead and grabbed my copperhead as well. The gun range wasn't clear this time. The old man behind the armored glass that ran the place gave me a lane, and when I went in, two of them were filled with, to my complete lack of surprise, a couple tiger claw grunts. Thankfully these guys were older than the normal teenagers I ran into, and they didn't do more than pass an eye over me as I carried my equipment into my lane.
I settled the copperhead down for now, and grabbed my Lexington. With a moment's effort I fitted the silencer onto the pistol and did some movement with it just to feel the weight difference. It would definitely change how I fired. I hit the switch, starting the electronic targets up, and amped the difficulty. Then I started firing. It was silent, other than the noise the targets made to indicate a hit. I went as fast as I could, each shot firing into the targets with barely a hint of noise. The bullets smacking into the concrete wall behind the targets honestly was the loudest thing in my lane. Something I would have to keep in mind. The noise baffler tech didn't silence the entire shot, even if it did cover a lot. But that was half the benefit of physically taking my gun out and shooting it at a range. Experience. And not just XP, I mean physical experience, on how my equipment worked. That and the XP helped keep me focused. Getting a blip of an alert in my system every once in a while as I kept up with the targets made it all worthwhile. Eventually though I had to stop, having run a few hundred rounds through my Lexington. The poor pistol was heating up pretty badly. I set it aside, leaving the silencer attached for now. While the heat of the silencer couldn't hurt my chrome hands, I wanted to let it cool down, and see how the silencer handled the stress I had just put it under before I messed with it. Instead I grabbed my copperhead. Once again I fell into the rhythm of just firing at the targets, trying to hit the center without hesitating, just instant point and shoot. The alerts came about as often as they had with the Lexington. The only thing that slowed me down was when I ran out of loaded magazines, and had to reload all of them. The copperhead though was more resistant to overheating than the Lexington. Despite firing more than twice as many rounds through it, it was handling the heat pretty well. Mostly because I wasn't using full auto, I supposed. Then finally I felt it more than anything. I wasn't checking the alerts, but instantly it felt like my body was moving faster, and my hits happened just that instant faster. I stopped and pulled up my alert list and wasn't surprised at what I found. The feeling of my body altering had become a pleasant experience. 100 handguns XP gained. 100 reflex XP gained. 100 handguns XP gained. 100 handguns XP gained. Handguns skill level up. 100 reflex XP gained. 100 assault XP gained. 100 assault XP gained. 100 reflex XP gained. 100 assault XP gained. 100 assault XP gained. 100 reflex XP gained. Reflex leveled up. Handgun 7 was nice. Reflex 8 though was a massive improvement. I hadn't leveled assault yet, but I paused and reloaded my mags. Then I lifted up my copperhead into the firing position and hit the button to activate the targets again. It had been a while since I just grinded my combat skills, relying on cool and the synergy of everything to kill without really needing to push my shooting skills, or my body. It felt good to get back into grinding out stats. It felt right, like I had forgotten something, and only now found it again. Damn kid. Not bad. The TC grunts were packing up, although they had stopped shooting constantly a while back. Mostly just hanging out with each other and shooting the shit. But I was absolutely drilling the targets, pushing myself to move as fast as I could to get every target hit as soon as they popped up. If my shoulders were still meat, they would be sore from handling the recoil and holding the rifle straight. Thanks. I called back in return but didn't stop my single-minded task. Ha. You ever thought about joining up with the Tigers, kid? You certainly got the ferocity for it. One of the men asked, having moved behind me to watch, as the other two packed up. My brother is the owner of the Kamikaze. Fujimura has been trying to get me in for a while. I answered. I wanted to be clear where I stood. I didn't really like having an adult standing right behind me like this, and I was in no mood to kill a bunch of grunts if I could just throw Zhern's name around. Ho. You're the Onryo. Another of the men suddenly called out, and I nearly jerked my gun. Quickly I lowered my weapon and then looked at the bastards. What did you just call me? Onryo. I heard that rumor. When the Kamikaze were cleaning up the scavs, they kept hitting dens that were already trashed. The man walked over and nodded to me, showing me real respect. A chum of mine is one of Fujimura-sama's gunmen. He worked with your brother that night. Told me they hit a few dens that were already cleared out, charnel houses of scavs cut to pieces. I winced a bit as I remembered just how messy I had gotten that night with my blade. The thermal katana does a good job keeping me from getting covered in blood as it cauterized most of the cut as I made it. But I had still been rough and quick. Half the cuts had been tearing the scavs in half. My thermal katana was meant for fighting Borgs and armored enemies after all. So that was you, huh? Damn. You certainly don't look like an Onryo, but I just saw that shooting you were doing. Nasty trigger time there. If you are even half as good with a blade, I could see you earning that nickname. I already have a nickname. It's Ghost. I grumbled. Fucking Onryo is dumb. Well, there you go. Onryo is a ghost, so it fits just fine. More claws-like anyways. Look at your brother, we aren't calling him the ogre. It would be less cringe if you did. I muttered, but thankfully none of the men heard my whispered grumbles. Well, we won't hold you up, Onryo. Good shooting. They offered and I opened my mouth to argue that wasn't my nickname, but they weren't listening. I turned raised my copperhead and started firing. The only way to make this better was more XP. I got home and instantly took my equipment to my room for cleaning and going over. I pulled open my silencer to check on the electronics and winced. Yep. That was some melted wires. I ended up pulling out the entire baffler and after a few minutes of messing around replaced the wiring with a more heat-resistant wire, but that still left the main electronics board that was getting some heat scoring. So I pushed the entire silencer into my printer to be eaten up and went to work on a different design. This one with a slightly longer profile. More of a rectangle, with some actual heat sinks scored into it, so that it can displace the heat a bit more. I mean, it wasn't as necessary. It wasn't like I would be firing my silenced pistol hundreds of rounds in a single fight, but if I could design the silencer to have a bit of endurance, I wouldn't have to worry about replacing it constantly. Besides, it was kind of fun. It didn't take me long to make the changes in CAD and upload it into the printer, and with a bit more metals to feed the build, I set it to construct. Finished cleaning the Lexington and my copperhead and then decided it was time to get a meal. I was unpackaging a fried noodle dish I had grabbed from a cart downstairs and was back on the couch when the door opened. I relaxed from nearly quit drawing seeing it was just June and Akari again, both of whom looked tired and worn out, and about halfway to crashing. Okay, what is up with you two? Who died? I demanded, standing up on the couch and pointing. About 5 of my men. Akari answered instantly and June jostled her to get her to stop talking. Oh.